Hi there, 80s TV Ladies listeners. We want to take a moment to remind you that your vote is your voice, and your voice matters. This coming November is one of the most important elections of our lifetime, so please make sure you are registered to vote. You can go to vote.org to check your registration or sign up and make sure that your voice is heard. That's vote.org, VOTE.org. Hello, everyone. Welcome to 80s TV Ladies. I'm Susan Lambert-Haddam, and I'm super nerdball excited today.
And I'm Sharon Johnson. We're your host, and we're talking about female-driven TV shows from the 1980s.
And I am nerding out, Sharon, because we have another special guest today from Scarecrow Mrs. King. Today, we're going to be talking about acting in the 80s, Kate Jackson, Bruce Boxleitner, and 80s hair with the actress who played Agent Francine Desmond in Scarecrow Mrs. King.
And I have many, many questions about Animal House and Love, Sydney. Welcome to SMK Special Edition with Martha Smith.
Ta-da!
Martha is probably best known for her motion picture debut as the Southern cheerleader Barbara Babs Jansen, rival to John Belushi's Bluto in the comedy blockbuster Animal House. She's made hundreds of TV appearances in shows from Days of Our Lives, Happy Days, Charlie's Angels, to Taxi.
So welcome, Martha Smith.
Well, thank you, guys.
I'm going to nerd out, so forgive me for that.
I'll nerd with you.
Okay, good. We have so much to talk about. But before we get into all things SMK, we need to talk about a couple of projects that happened before Scarecrow.
Okay.
Animal House.
Yeah.
I mean, things happened for you before that, but Animal House, can you talk about, did you know what you were getting into with that movie?
Not at all, no. It's everybody's first movie, except for like Donald Sutherland and Tim Matheson, maybe. But so we were all virgins for the film scene. And Animal House, I got called in to read for the other role, the other blonde cheerleader that always gets confused with me. But, you know, that scene read in the script, she stands nude in front of the window and masturbates herself. And there was another scene in the script that said, she's in her cheerleader outfit. She jumps up in the splits with nothing on underneath her skirt, and John Belushi looks up. So I thought, I don't know if I'm going to do this right now. My first film role, you know, I had been fighting that image. And I saw the other role, the Southern cheerleader who was just such a bitch. And so I thought, well, this looks like a lot of fun. I could get my teeth into that. And I asked them, can I read for Babs? And they said, yeah. And so that was the genesis of how that came about. And no, nobody knew. Landis knew. John Landis, our director, he sent us little kind of 1930s postcards every day in our mailbox at the hotel. And he sent us, they would say, we're making a great movie. This is going to be historic. This is legend. And he'd say at the end of the scene, you know, this scene's going down in history. And we're like, all right. You know, nobody knew. But it all came together in such a fresh way that at that time hadn't happened. And I really attribute so much of that to, besides casting, our writers were phenomenal from Harvard Lampoon, come National Lampoon, Doug Kenny, who we lost in 1980, and Harold Ramis and Chris Miller, those guys. And then John Landis, his spin on it all, also being very new to film. It was like his second or third film, you know, and he had this frenetic kind of comedy sensibility. So, and Belushi, you know, throw that in the mix from Saturday Night Live, and boom, it just did it.
Amazing. And so, you know, those guys have a reputation. What was
Which
it?
ones? All of them.
John Belushi and all of them. But so was it like professional on set? Was it like chaos on set?
Well, there was a kind of organized chaos for the comedy to spin. John Landis is a character who you can tell in his films, he is operating at a different hyper speed than everybody else. So he's like, be funny, do this now, we're throwing this. You know, he's really on top of the rhythm. But that was the chaos. The chaos was nothing to do with John Belushi. John Belushi was totally professional actor, always on time, always there, did his role, knew what to do, very funny, very kind. And I loved working with him. I didn't see drugs. I'm sure I'm not naive. You know, I know, seeing the stories and read the books and all of that. And I know how he died. But for his filming on the set of our movie, he was there as an actor, you know. I went to a party at his house. And even then, I didn't, you know, it was a brunch. I didn't see anything. We all went to a party. And I don't know. It's just something that was separate.
What a phenomenal talent. And it's so funny how many 6 degrees of separation there are, because Eugenia Ross Lemming started with John Belushi in Second City. So we talked to her, last week. And so
Kevin Bacon, throw him in too.
I know. There you go. Everybody's connected everywhere around the world. Melissa has a question.
No, I have a connection to both Tim Matheson and Harold Ramis.
Okay.
Rest in peace, Harold Ramis.
Yes.
He was great to work with. I worked with him.
Yeah.
He was directing a TV movie that I was working on. Yeah.
You were working on, what do you remember what the name of it was?
No, it was, but it was really fun working with him.
He seemed like a sweetheart. Yeah. So Melissa was in camera work for many a decade.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Matheson directed Without a Trace.
Okay. All right.
Tim's great.
Yeah.
Tim, what an otter. What a wonderful otter. He's a gynecologist now. Beverly Hills.
And I have a good friend who was an extra on Animal House. He was in the scene near the opening of the movie where there's a party at the frat house. And what's hilarious about Dennis is being able to see him on screen is he's wearing this yellow sweater. And
I remember the yellow sweater.
Do you really?
I think I do. Yes, because that's a great scene. I'm in that scene.
So you see him sitting over in the corner somewhere with some people, and then they cut away to looking at the other direction. There he is going out the door. So throughout the entirety of the scene, you see that. But he's also in the scene where the pledges are being rousted out of bed and they're lined up, and he's in that. He's one of the guys in that as well. And I was just telling them recently that when he was shooting it, he was a freshman at OU, and one day found a couch to sit on to do some reading for a class, and here comes John Belushi and sits down, and they proceed to have a lovely conversation for about an hour.
Yeah.
So, I had nothing but great things to say about him, which echoes exactly what you were saying as well.
Yeah, and I hate what happens posthumously when they take pots at these people, and everybody's got flaws, but they'll take them, magnify them, make them uber dramatic, like some sort of novella, which they're doing right now with Hefner. And it really bothers me when the dead person isn't there to defend themselves, and people go in for this kill,
Everybody's not one thing, so.
So let's talk about your Playboy time, because that was a big breakthrough. There's a good segue. You brought it up. Let's go. But I mean, come on, you're from Midwest, right? Yeah. You're young. Were you trying to be an actress and a model?
No, that was the least thing in my mind, honestly. I wanted to be a shrink. I wanted to be a psychologist. And actually, I had been accepted to a community college at a very young age, but they told me they discouraged me from going. I was going to major in psychology. They said, you're going to, not socially, it's not good for you. It'll kill your passion for psychology. And so I went and worked in a mental institution instead at that time as a very young person in an extremely regressed ward. But I saw later on the similarities between, acting and psychology and all of these other ologies that you just take your character apart. I wanted to be a professional. I was in that era where that was what I was going to do, but didn't get a full college education. So my next goal was to get out of the house and to move into my own place very young and get a little money to put down on rent. And I took up modeling because my sister was a model, and she had been in Playboy before me. She had been the top half of A Rare Bird. You probably remember that.
I don't, but I'm going to go look it up.
But it was just one of those, exotic pictures. And so she kind of broke in the ice for the family, which is a very conservative family from the Midwest, like you say. So I was modeling in Detroit, when you're a model, you're actually modeling for cars and windshield washer wipers and generators and engines, and very glamorous work. So I was modeling for Ford Motor Company, doing a brochure for the new cars. And a guy walked in and said he was a talent scout for Hefner. And he was, in fact, he wasn't lying. Go figure. In those days, people really were. And he gets a little kickback for anybody who gets accepted, right? He said, would you be interested in shooting some pictures? I said, okay, why not? I'm thinking rent money. And we shot the pictures. They went to Chicago. They called me in immediately to fly in to shoot. And then they accepted me after the test shoot. And I think this was like just a few months before, how publishing is. There's that lead time, right? They had to throw out another person who was scheduled for my month, which was July, and put me in really fast because they were excited about it, right? Because it was a really good shoot. So that's what happened. That all happened really fast. They hand you this contract and just say, sign here while you're shooting. Okay, I'll sign. I'm just a teenager. I don't know anything about contracts. So that's what happens there. And that part of it is true. You do get kind of wrangled into a lifetime in perpetuity contract for all media ever invented in the future of the universe. Yeah, every picture you take, everything you shoot ends up somewhere, anytime. You sign up on it.
Wow.
So I was really young. I got my rent money.
You got your rent. You made rent.
I did. And still didn't want to be an actress. I mean, I had studied a bit, but mostly more from the theatrical side. And that was just kind of an anomaly. But they put me on the road for like 5 or 6 years. A lot of travel. I was representing the magazine for meet and greets and the press and things like that, openings of whatever. And so that they liked that I could walk and talk at the same time. As you can see, Chatty Cathy's going. And so that became a lot of travel and brought me to LA quite a few times, which I decided I'd move out here. And then everything else happened by accident, honestly.
Well, it's beautiful weather out here. So that's...
Yeah, you're here too, right?
I am here too. And Georgia isn't terrible weather. It's beautiful weather too. But I love the snow to visit.
Yeah.
But I couldn't live in it for very long, I don't think.
Oh, no. I got in my Impala. I had this big, green, honking Detroit metal car, and I had cruise control. So I thought it was uber cool with cruise control in my car. So I'm doing like yoga postures, driving on the freeway, going to California. Here I come. Everything I own in the back of the Impala.
And what year is this?
This is 1975, I think. Pretty sure it was 75. Yeah. And I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to enroll at UCLA and go back to studying. That was my plan. And what happened was I was still modeling and still working with Playboy. And somebody called me at Universal Studios to do an album cover for the music department. And the guy that was there at the shoot, he said, I really want you to meet my friend Bob Lysanka upstairs in the tower. And Bob Lysanka was head of casting for all Universal everything at the time. Older man, very gentlemanly. And for some reason, he did not hit on me or anything like this, but for some reason he said, this girl's going to be a star, like old Hollywood. And he took me down to every single Universal casting director in the tower and introduced me in that same fashion. Next thing I knew, I had like 6 roles at Universal, the kind that, you get stabbed and shot and strangled and chloroformed to death. But that were my first roles, were all Universal.
Oh, my God.
And then Animal House came shortly thereafter.
And then shortly after this was my discovery today, Ebony, Ivory, and Jade.
Oh,
holy
you discovered
crap.
You must have been digging.
That is so great. This is 1979 TV movie co-starring Debbie Allen and Bert Convy and Nina Foch. And we're going to talk about her in a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it's not to be confused with Ebony, Ivory, and Jade blaxploitation movie from 1976. This is basically a Charlie's Angels, right?
Yeah, kind of. And actually, I did the first season of Charlie's Angels with Kate, which is also ironic. And I did How the West Was Won with Bruce, way before Scarecrow. But anyways, back to Ebony, Ivory, and Jade with Debbie. Wow, yeah, that was everybody in town auditioned for that. And I was not a singer dancer. I mean, I had sung and I have sung professionally, but I'm married to a singer, so I know my levels and my limits. Very, very modest and mediocre.
You're beautiful. You have it's a beautiful. I saw the opening number. It's fantastic.
Oh gosh,
you're great.
Dancing.
You're up against Debbie Allen. Yeah.
Nobody dances like her. I mean, and so poor thing. I felt sorry for her because they throw me in with her at very different levels, and. But I got it. And they kept telling me, don't worry, we'll fix it in post. And I remember the audition because I sang Rolling on a River. And I was dancing to the...
It is fantastic. I only got to watch the first 10 minutes and I'm hooked. I'm going to go back and finish it. So Bert Convy stars as Mick Jade, a former tennis bum turned Las Vegas song and dance man, and who doubles as a private eye with 2 female dancers, Ebony and Ivory. And the trio go undercover to protect a lady scientist from an international hitman as she heads to Washington, D.C. from the Middle East with her secret formula. Good God, that's a great show.
And doesn't that sort of ring a little bit of Scarecrow?
Sounds a little bit like Scarecrow Mrs. King. But how adorable. You and Debbie Allen are fantastic. Again, I only got to watch 10 minutes of it, but I'm going to go back and finish it.
Good enough.
Anyway, but you have a beautiful singing voice. And so but you didn't train as a singer.
I did a bit. And why was I? There was something I did. It was Ebony, Ivory and Jade, but there's something else. My very first SAG job I sang, but that was just silly. I think it was for Ebony, Ivory and Jade that I started the lessons maybe earlier. And then I continued them. And I actually met my husband while singing. This is a good story. I'll give you the story. Whether you use it or not, it's fine. It's your choice. But VH1 had come to do a story on me as I started a singing group. It was one of those strikes we get in town. I always do another creative project when we have a strike. So I had all my girlfriends, a bunch of girls get together, and I had a friend who owned a cabaret in town. So we did this group. I had stand-up bass, and it was kind of a cabaret, weird show. But I wanted to do a duet. There's a song that Tom Waits and Bette Midler did called Never Talk to Strangers, if you know that one. And I wanted to do that song really badly, so I needed a guy. And I was out, VH1 had done this show on me, showing my singing at home with piano. And I said, just use any of this footage you want. Don't use the first 15 seconds because it's off key. Well, VH1 used the first 15 seconds. Martha Smith is singing for her supper. And, it was just this pathetic character that was off the show, Scarecrow, and didn't have anything going on. She was singing in this little play. It was one of those. I was so depressed watching that show. I went to our local hangout. And they have people singing there, if you're a good singer, you can sing at this place. It was called Backstage in Beverly Hills. And my now husband was singing this amazing voice, right? And I'm really drawn to voice. And he was singing, I don't remember which song he was singing at the time, but I went up to him and started singing with him. And I didn't know then he never shares his microphone, but anyways, it was really going well. And I asked him if he could do a duet of Tom Waits. He said yes. He came for rehearsal. He did Tom Waits so well. I gave him 6 songs in the show. And here's the fun part. The show, we fell in love on stage performing the show. It went on and it developed. It was kind of a storyline. It's like theater and music. So these couple meet, they hate each other, they get together, they love each other, they divorce, they get back together. So while we're doing the show, he had fired my bass player and hired a new one. He fired my keyboard player and hired a new one. He fired the backup singer and hired a new one. And then he fired me, had a band, and married me and had a wife and a band. He never tells that part of the story. He always says, I saw him singing and fell in love. And that's the end of the story.
And that's the end of the story.
So I just want to get the record straight.
The record is now straightened. And then I also want to talk about, you starred in an episode of Taxi. You starred in a lot of 80s television, but Taxi, I loved.
Yes, the best show, the best people, the best writers, the best producers and directors. It was just a wonderful, wonderful show.
It totally holds up. We've been rewatching that too, because this all started because my husband and I started rewatching 80s television during the pandemic. And
funny.
Yeah. And we actually met because of our mutual love of Stephen Cannell shows. But ultimately, we've just gone through like the 70s and the 80s a lot. And then I was like, well, I really have something to say about all these ladies in the 80s and what they were doing. And it rhymed. So, we had to make a podcast. But you starred in season 3, Elaine's Old Friend.
I love that. Yeah.
We're rewatching it. The show holds up pretty well. I mean, like really well so far. The writing is really great. The characters are really great. The acting is really great. And the guest stars are pretty amazing.
And they were all so nice. Just Judd Hirsch, who was at the time, he had the biggest dressing room and he was like the star of the show. He gave me his dressing room because I kind of came in at the last. I had my quick study for everybody in town kind of knew that. So I get these jobs at the last minute. Can you learn the script in like 32 minutes? Yes, I'll be there. So he gave me his dressing room, a dozen roses. I mean, just as a gesture of welcome to a guest star.
Wow.
He does that.
Wow.
Very sweet. Very sweet.
Oh my God. All right. Well, okay. I'm so excited. Okay. But now I think we have to get into Scarecrow Mrs. King because that's the whole point of this show.
Oh, that's right.
Oh yeah. I am interested in what you were doing right before you got cast in Scarecrow Mrs. King. Like, how'd you get the gig, the audition?
Sure? You want to know this?
I do. We want to know it.
So 1982 was a really rough year. It was, the stress test. I was checking every box off on this. I was in the middle of going through a divorce. I had gone early in the year to Korea to do a movie with Vic Morrow, who I got very close to during the filming. Later that year, he was to die. And then we also lost John Belushi in that year. I had been working on a soap opera also on Days of Our Lives. And for the bulk of 1982, maybe can't remember what months it was, but anyways, they fired me at the end of the year on Pearl Harbor Day. They dropped the bomb on me. They fired me very unceremoniously, I will say. And it was good, though, because I was playing this like crying surgeon that was always killing my patients. One of them was my husband, Oops. So I called her Sandy Oops Horton, Dr. Sandy Horton. And 2 days later, after they fired me, it turned out to be a good thing, which happens in life so often. I went for Tony Randall over at Warner Brothers. This is how it ties in. Tony Randall was looking for a brand new lead on his show, which was Love, Sydney. If you're familiar with that.
Yes.
That was the only American TV show to star a closeted gay man. And yet, because at the time, this was, again, the 80s, so there was the special interests that were trying to get the show not to do that. And so they had to dance very carefully. And they brought me in as his first female love interest. And this was the first time they were going to really share with the audience that he was actually a gay man. And I think this Love, Sydney was taken from a movie of the same name. I'm positive about that, where he actually was gay. They were allowed to do that in movies, but TV was different because you had sponsors and commercials. So this episode was like a double episode tearjerker. And it's a sitcom, right? But they wanted to introduce this character. My character has no idea he's gay, and why is he rejecting me? We fall in love. And it's this really beautifully written. And meanwhile, what happened was the president of Warner's TV came to our taping, and he was very impressed with my work. Now, my work was really good because I had been going through the divorce, had the deaths, and that they're being fired, and all these things that had just happened. So the tears were coming very naturally on
a little bit of method going on there.
And he made note, and it was shortly thereafter, like the next month, that the Scarecrow script came around. And it was 3 years later that I found out that he had shepherded me into that role and championed me. Now, he said he didn't have to, twist any arms or anything, but he wanted to make sure that I got the proper attention because he'd seen my work and liked it so much. Because I did comedy and drama in that particular show. Now, Love, Sydney did not get picked up for another season, unfortunately, because I was real excited to work with Tony Randall.
Yeah.
But then again, how that all works out, along comes Scarecrow. Along comes Scarecrow.
And so you had worked with Bruce and Kate before that.
Yeah, very small roles.
Yeah. And so when you went in, did you know who was going to be starring in it, or was it still all unknown?
For me, for my readings and I had 3 auditions, it was only called the Secret Kate Jackson Project, and everything was very hush-hush. So yeah, just like Scarecrow, right? And they wouldn't give me the script. They just gave me the sides. So I just had my scene. So I was had hard to put together who everybody was. But I knew Kate. I didn't know Bruce. I don't even know if Bruce was brought on at my first interview. I went to read for Eugenie Ross Lippman, for Mary Hartman, and Brad Buckner. And Eugenie read Kate's role. And we did a couple of scenes. And in those scenes, I noticed, because at the time, I had this photographic memory, so I know everybody's lines in every script. So I noticed she was changing the lines a lot. And I'm thinking, well, that's weird. Maybe she's just like watching me and not looking at her script or something. And I just improvised and did it. Second callback, same thing. Eugenie changing the lines again. I'm like, okay, but it went really well. And the laughs were in the right place because it was comedic foil. And then I found out later about her Second City background and all of that. I knew about Mary Hartman, but I didn't know. And I found out later also that on Scarecrow, we had to very, very, very often work improv. Scripts were changed frequently, like while you're walking onto the set, while the camera's action.
Oh my gosh.
So you had to think on your feet. And I think, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that's sort of what they were testing. It got down to 3 people for the screen test.
Do you know who the other 2 were?
No, they were very beautiful. They were blonde. And we were all in the hallway together and not looking at each other, not talking to each other. But in those days, they had the final screen test in just like an office room. And I was the third one of the 3 to go in, and I could hear the 2 before me, and they were reading.
Oh my!
And I kind of knew at that point, because there is certain comedic snap to Francine that has to be really crisp. And the scenes they were doing, I just sort of knew I could have fun with that. And I went in the third knowing, this is going to be fun. And I got it. I was so excited.
Oh my God. So you're excited. So you're shooting a pilot, But like in some ways, like was Ebony, Ivory and Jade a backdoor pilot? Do you think? Were they thinking of making a show?
That was a pilot.
That was a pilot.
Yeah, I did quite a few pilots, it seems, that didn't get sold. So that the producers said, if it sells, we're all happy. If it doesn't sell, you get the gowns. I don't know if you saw the sequin gowns we wore in the Las Vegas show at the Aladdin. So I've still got that gown.
You still got the gown. Oh, wow. They were fabulous gowns. Again, that opening sequence, very impressive.
Yeah.
But all right, so you get the pilot and then they shot the pilot in DC. You guys shot the pilot in DC. Did you go to DC?
No, I didn't go to DC. They shot a lot of external and filler stuff in DC with Kate and Bruce, but none of us went to DC. I don't think Billy Melrose, I don't think he went either. I'm not sure. But no, I didn't go to DC. The pilot, let's see, we did the pilot in March, and then I got in a big motorcycle accident.
Oh, no.
And because they were having the big gala event that the networks have to show all the affiliates around the country. It's called the O&O event, the black tie thing. So I was in crutches and a big cast for that because I just gotten in a motorcycle accident. So I had to like hobble across the stage with all the new stars for CBS. They weren't really happy about that, I don't think. And then I went on tour with Rod Stewart because we had a few months between, and that's another story. And then we came back and did, it got sold right away after it was shown to the network. It got picked up for 13 and we started filming.
I do want to come back to the Rod Stewart story
okay, that's for
a second, because that's hard to pass up. You went on tour with Rod Stewart.
Body Wishes tour, yeah. I was good friends with Rita Wilson at the time, and she'd been studying in Europe. I believe that's what was going on. I decided to go to Paris because, we were in between the pilot. You got like 3 months between the pilot and the shoot date. So I knew I had all this time. So once my leg healed, then I could walk again and dance. I went to Paris, and the first night I went to La Coupole, which is a big, huge 1927 Rue Montparnasse restaurant, enormous restaurant. We go to the back booth, and sitting right next to us in the next booth is a guy I grew up with in 1970s, Michigan, Detroit, a rock and roller. I knew because I've always been a rock and roll girl. And he's sitting there, and I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Oh, I'm on tour with my band." And he said, "You want to come with us?" So about 2 seconds later, after thinking it over really thoroughly, I said, "Yeah, okay." It was Rod Stewart, and it was the Body Wishes tour. And they were that next day, I think we went to Versailles, Paris, South of France, Italy, kind of around. And it was really, really fun, really exciting. I thought it was like research for Francine.
Oh my God.
Of course.
That is hilarious. I
It was
love
work,
that.
okay? I wrote it all
It
on
was
my
for
tab.
work, for sure. It was all for work. It wasn't for having.
Everything
Oh
for
no,
work.
I'm getting a picture now. Motorcycle rider
Work.
running off with Rod Stewart's band. Yeah.
Work.
Okay. All right. Hard working.
I work hard.
Work hard. Play hard. Martha Smith. Oh my God. All right, I'm so excited. Okay, we're going to have to take a break here.
I think that's a great idea. Stay tuned for more of our interview with Martha Smith from Scarecrow and Mrs. King.
Martha Smith.
Some gals have all the luck. Some gals have all the pain. This gal rocks hard with Rod Stewart. Same gal starts back at Mrs. King. Martha Smith works hard, plays hard. Martha Smith? Martha Smith.
All right, and we're back.
Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Martha Smith from Scarecrow and Mrs. King. This is 80s TV Ladies.
And so suddenly you're on a hit show that's
Yeah.
running, and you have 13 episodes.
And mind you, I had just been divorced, kicked out of my house. I had 6 days I got the show 6 days after I moved into a new place. I had to grab a roommate, find something, move all the boxes. And that all happened. I didn't think I'd have, any money again anymore because I had started a greeting card line. So all my money was tied up from the soap opera in these cards that were just sitting in a warehouse. And it was 6 days and I had that. So then it becomes a hit. You imagine this like cascading good luck that I got. Thank you.
And so we sort of mentioned when we were exchanging emails that the Francine that Eugenie Ross Lemming and Brad Buckner created was the Francine you liked the most.
Yes, and that's just personal because that's just, I love satire and I love comedy. Those are the things I love. Those guys did it great. They knew it. That was their genre. Now, I think if I were to look more objectively and not just look about myself, what I like, if I look at the whole big picture of the show was better when it became a little bit more of a generic tone of the romantic comedy adventure series that it ended up being, as opposed to there was more bite in everything in the earlier, this is my opinion only, but especially from my character only. So I loved that, and I loved playing that. It turned out that it wasn't loved by everybody. And so there was some back and forth trying to figure out how to work with that part of the character. And for a while, they just stripped it out, and I became kind of expositionary, like somebody, Billy, line 4, pick up now. There's the file. Go get the truck, Lassie. So for a while, that's what happened. But I think we rediscovered her.
Well, I think that it was one of the things that I loved about the show.
Really?
Was that there was another female agent, A, right? You could easily do this show and it's just her in a sea of male agents. But there was another female agent who was clearly capable, who was clearly had her own agenda.
Yes.
And that even though there was some snark.
Oh, yes.
Lots of snark.
Yeah.
In those early episodes, there's a weird kind of, I'll make room for you, but I think you're an idiot. And so the fact that basically there were just two very different women approaching a particular career in a very different way felt very female driven because there were two women doing something in the same space.
I don't know between Eugenie and Brad, but that was probably Eugenie's input, that part of the storyline and the characters. And Francine was so power driven. I mean, she could have been easily a man in the script. You could just take away her fashion sense, we could call it.
Okay, great. And, let's dive in. Come on.
No, you're gonna go there. I
was gonna wait, but now we're gonna do it. We got to talk about Francine's hair, Francine's outfits, costumes and hair, huge. And we know with women, particularly in television, that there's a lot of discussion about what the women's hair is going to be doing. At least there is now.
So you see, this has been my hair since probably I graduated from high school. I'm not big on change, but I played those characters before. The hairdresser was a lovely woman. She was so sweet and so kind. And I just hate to say anything at all disparaging, but she was from an era and styles that were considerably different than, and that was the vision that she brought to the early Francine. As time went on, I got a perm, and everybody did in the 80s, right? So I kept begging if they would let me kind of go more natural in the makeup and the hair, because there was a lot of makeup too in the earlier days. And then the wardrobe was not. So what I ended up doing after a season or two is I made a big folder of what I thought Francine should look like. I just wanted to please help me on this, And I went to producers and everybody, and I showed them, I pulled all these tear sheets out of Vogue and Bazaar, and I saw her as very sophisticated, very avant-garde and into fashion, but she used fashion more like she used her words, kind of like a weapon, her one-upsmanship, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
She was really into that and her rivalry. So fashion was part of it. I thought it was really important, but it didn't quite get across, but things got better and easier as time went on. There was just a lot of adjusting.
All right. And I've been taking up a lot of time. I've been taking up a lot of questions. So I have to hand some off to Sharon.
Oh, okay.
Well, for the moment anyway, let's stay a little bit with, the hair and wardrobe.
Sharon!
No, because as someone who worked in an office at that time, there was a somewhat consistency with what women were asked to wear at the time. So, well, not asked to wear, but what was sort of the style. Maybe a little exaggerated in some respects, but still, Francine looked like a professional woman of that time. It kind of made sense. But did I put you on the spot? No, not at all. Because I mean, in a lot of ways, that was sort of the lived experience. But that said, I wasn't sure I don't know anything about the spy business, so I don't know that that's necessarily what all the female spies were wearing at the time, but certainly
Those earrings?
yeah, exactly. There were some times where I thought, really? But again, it's a television show, so. But I did like her. I did like her style to a large extent, and because she looked like a professional woman of that time, what people were wearing in the office. And I know that the relationship between Francine and Kate Jackson's character evolved over time, which I also appreciated. And it also kind of brings me back to something else that you said earlier about in the roles that you had over time. You did comedy, you did drama, you did a lot of different kinds of things. But did you have a preference, or do you have a preference in terms of drama versus comedy?
Oh, man, I'll take comedy any day of the week. I mean, I just like hanging out with comics. I like funny people. I really believe there's a higher value to making people laugh beyond the obvious. It feels good. I think there's even a medical value to that, and psychological, certainly. I'll take comedy and satire, the finest form of comedy and the hardest to write and really recognize. I think I'll take that any day, yeah.
Did you have a sense, too, over the course of the series, as different writers and different showrunners came in, was there a change to your mind in terms of the tone of the show? Be it, oh, now we're more comedic. Oh, now we're less comedic. And okay, now we're, I mean, I know, from episode to episode maybe, but I kind of mean more in general in terms of what their approaches might have been.
Yeah, we had a lot of comings and goings of production and writing staff. So it's hard. These people sometimes came on and from the ground running, they had to familiarize themselves with the show, like you might have done before this podcast, with the episodes, with the characters. And so obviously the focus is going to be on Kate and Bruce. That's the meat and potatoes of the show. We're just the little fluff on the side dishes. So I think a lot of times Francine would get lost in the shuffle, and they didn't quite know, what is this? Oh, she's like kind of a, I don't know, she's a talk backing kind of secretary or something. They didn't know what to do with her. And so hence not a lot was done with her for quite a long time. But yeah, there were changes. And so we would just take meetings and try to talk and communicate that. And it wasn't till I think year 3 that I did have to go to Alan Shane, who was, again, the president of Warner Brothers at the time. And I had to go to him for a couple of reasons. I had to say, things are getting really hard here. I'm not being allowed every year. I was allowed to do 3 guest stars on other shows on my days off. Nobody was letting me do those guest stars. And I kept getting offers and having to turn them down. And at the time I was saying again, Billy, hurry, the truck's coming. I was not doing much. I was sitting in my trailer. And so I had to go to him to ask if my contract would be honored and if I could maybe get my character closer to some semblance of what it originally was created, just those kind of things, a little discussion. He was so nice. And that's when he told me about the Love Sydney and all of that. So I didn't know that for years. He, by the way, is 96 now.
Oh, wow.
And still active. And he wrote a book called Double Life, that he was the closeted gay himself in early Hollywood. And he's had the same husband now for over 50 years.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's very beautiful.
And I think his special interest in Love Sydney comes from his life was sort of reflected in that show in some ways, and so maybe that's why he came to that, it all just fell together that way. I really liked him.
What you mentioned about your contract allowing you to do guest appearances on other shows, was that fairly common at the time for that to be?
Yeah, everybody, I think the standard contract, when you do the pilot, they lock you in for a 7-year contract, just in case the show gets really big and you're still stuck with, you're going to $10 increase next year. Yay. So in that contract, you have these, I think it was 3 outs per year to do other, and I've been even asked by the network to do, I used to do a lot of the on-camera reality stuff. So they wanted me to host parades like the Christmas parade, the Macy's, that kind of stuff. I had to turn those down.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't like I was carrying a big storyline. I just wasn't being allowed out. I'm not even sure why or who, but it was difficult. And because I wasn't being creative on the show so much then, I wanted to do something where I could play another character or play a character,
I'm fascinated by when women get to be in scenes together that aren't, about men. So there were a couple episodes where Francine and Amanda get to work together, and the maid one.
I love the maid. That's my favorite.
It's adorable. You guys are fantastic together. You're really funny together. It's wonderful. I think Francine gets to be very Francine, and Amanda gets to be very Amanda.
Very,
and yet you sort of both kind of win, right? So it's to me, it was one of the the stronger episodes of that season.
Do you know what season that was? Was that 2? I'm curious because that was a really nice kind of forming a relationship with Amanda and Francine there, and that was so fun to shoot. She was great. She really was wonderful.
You tell her she did a great job.
Oh my goodness.
And it's so startling. And she's so startling. You're like, that was great, man. It's where she pushes the meat over somebody and like at the very end.
Yeah, that at the end, and we shake hands or something. And that was that actual meat packing plant in Vernon. Oh my goodness, the smell. Yeah.
I want to talk about the fans. It's a really core fan base for Scarecrow Mrs. King.
It's amazing.
And yet what's funny is it seems to be multi-generational. It seems to be people that originally found the show and then people that found the show later and that weren't around.
And watched with their parents. I get a lot of that. My mother, I watched it when I was little with my mom,
And do you see a difference in those fans and what they love about the show?
I am always kind of confused about no, honestly. I mean, I think it's a great show and all, but they're so avid and they're very smart, our fans. And they know, like I say, they kind of memorize everything. So I asked actually David, who I think you might be talking with, David Johnson, who's working on the book with Taya. I talked to him recently when he was in town about what is it? And he gave me, that it was the characters and how real they were and the storyline and all of that stuff. And I see it, but it's just that it's lasted so long. I mean, we have, Jeanette throws these events that are these reunions along with David and other people. And these people come from all over the world, from other countries. They fly in just to talk about this show. How many years later?
Well, I think that's something sort of unique to television because, it comes into your house every week and you watch it and you, as you said, fall in love with the characters, and then there are reruns and you can watch them over again. And there's so much content and it's also something that everybody else can watch. Everybody else, and when the internet allowed you to make it easy to find other people who share your love of something, I think it's, I know that all sorts of content has all sorts of fan bases, but I think the television fan bases are very unique in that way.
Yeah. And I think there was a warmth in the relationship, certainly with Kate and Bruce, that kept them coming back for more as they kind of teased that relationship along, slowly hinted and, played with the audience a little bit with that. I think that kept them coming.
But I think it's also the relationships that Amanda had, that everybody had between them. It really was a good team.
Yeah.
For all of the ups and downs and back and forth, it's a good team that ultimately does work really well together.
Yeah.
And it definitely, the first season felt a little bit more like an ensemble show, and then it does sort of become, not that it's not about Bruce and Kate, because it's Scarecrow Mrs. King, but it felt more ensemble in the first season. It felt like there was more time spent in the spy world of spies, trying to figure it out. And yet the later seasons feel very Casey, right? They feel very case of the week.
Right.
And more concentrated on that and more serious. So I'm curious about, because there was a big upheaval in the middle of the season 1, where Eugenie Ross Lemming and Brad Buckner left the show. And Juanita Bartlett came on. Can you talk about that at all? Do you have memories of that time, what it felt like?
I am usually the last person on a set or on a job or anywhere to hear like the scoop. I'm always the one person. I don't know what it is about me, but I am literally always the last person. Really? That's what happened? So I just knew that, they had gone rather quickly. And Juanita had a real different flavor, but she had a really literary background, quite different in terms of tone. But I liked that she was strongly based from publishing background and whatnot. And I enjoyed her work, her scripts, and still Francine was different, but interesting. It didn't feel diluted or anything. Just a little different shade from my point of view. Every set is difficult, and ours had its difficulties. So I don't really want to go into it, but I'm telling you, I was always happy. I was every time I drive onto that lot and say hi to that guard gate and see my name on that parking spot, stage 24, I was a happy camper, and I had no problems on set or anything. I found it all just a great experience, really.
And so Bruce Boxleitner and you guys are still in touch. You still show up at the reunions.
Yeah, those reunions every now and then we'll see them. And Bruce and I have maintained the same sort of antagonistic relationship with each other, but it's just kind of a faux antagonism. It's really sort of like brother and sister bickering at each other, you know. And he always sees me for some reason as this like wild liberal. And so he says, I don't want to talk about any politics. Neither do I. Really. Now, Bruce, I don't want to talk about any horses. Okay, let's get this straight.
It was that it was that motorcycle accident that he's like, oh, she's off with Bruce, the rock stars.
Yes. Bruce always made fun of the man I was dating, and now that I look back, he was probably right. But he was always had something to say.
And he calls you Chatty Cathy.
He does. Isn't that endearing?
I heard a little Francine in that come back. And so you got to work a little bit with Beverly Garland, more in the early seasons. How was that? How was she?
I almost never got to work with her, actually. A little bit here and there. Yeah, like in the pilot, I think. And then, of course, it's Magda. But Beverly, I adored. I just loved her. Her birthday was one day off from mine. So we always had mutual birthday cake celebration and stuff. And she was a real hero to me. I just loved her, everything about her as a woman, as a person, as an actress. And it was always, but I didn't get to work with her very much at all. And her scenes were often another day, another location, another set. So I didn't get to see her, but we saw each other socially. And she would always invite me to her big Boxing Day parties and stuff like that. And we'd go to lunch. And I love Beverly.
And so let's talk about season 2. So the beginning of season 2 is a lot of Europe shows. Did you get to go to Europe? I think you were in...
Yes, I went to Europe.
Yes. Okay.
Please don't ask Bruce are you interviewing Bruce? Did you do it already?
We haven't done it already.
Oh, okay.
We're going to try and get him, but I don't know.
If you ask him about Europe, you're going to get all these terrible stories about me and German men and dating all these people. And the gynecologist story isn't true. Oh my God. You're going to hear stories from Bruce, okay? You just tell them you'd rather not discuss those things. They're very private.
They're very private. I only want to hear about Rod Stewart. Yeah. And so I think it's interesting when, you look at Remington and you look at Scarecrow in particular, because there's sort of two sides of a coin, and moonlighting being sort of the third side of that coin, because, coins have three sides. But it was the beginning of, and Cheers being part of that, it was a real exploration of power in relationships and I'm attracted to you, but I also need to be my own person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you noticed Francine never had a boyfriend until the last season.
I know. And so, and again, but Francine was having a life, right? Yeah. She was big life. I'm going embassy parties. I need to meet the prince of, whomever. I did like that about Francine. Francine was very clear about what she wanted. That was very clear.
Clear and unapologetic. She was not apologetic about what she wanted and what she was doing and how she was doing it. And I like that a lot about her too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Francine appreciates that. I had decided that Francine was a daddy's girl, and Daddy was extremely ambitious and wanted her to strive to attain the same sorts of standards. And so their competitiveness came out of just her hardwiring. She couldn't really do anything about it. And so she just accepted it. And that was her life. She just needed to always get further, succeed, climb that ladder and get to the top of everything. And nothing was going to get in her way.
And so what were some of your favorite, most memorable episodes for Francine?
Oh, definitely Life at the Party, which is what I call Maids. But anytime I could go undercover, I loved anytime I could speak different languages. And we had the Afghanistan kidnapping episode.
Yeah.
I got to wear no makeup and my natural hair in that one when I got kidnapped, because I was supposed to be I was so happy. That was what I looked like in those days. Nobody knew what I looked like. People would come to interview at my home and they'd go, Francine? And Magda was fun. Magda Petrak from Hungary, of course. I got to do that twice. So that was fun because that nice dark wig and the Jackie O look.
I think that one of my favorite Francine and Amanda scenes was, I think, early in season 4, when it really became apparent to everybody else that Amanda and Lee were seeing each other outside the office, if you will. And Francine said to her, "Are you sure? Because of the way that this could complicate things, complicate your life." And it didn't come across as anything other than concern for Amanda, as far as I was concerned.
Oh.
It wasn't catty. It wasn't jealousy. It was just, have you thought about all the ramifications of this? And are you sure you really want to do this? And I really appreciated that.
And I don't remember that. They must have cut out the catty part. Always on the editing room floor.
But see, I never really saw Francine as, she may have been snarky, but she wasn't catty.
That's true.
It was more that she just had a hard time understanding how and why this person who wasn't trained and hadn't gone through the things that Francine had gone through was getting the opportunities that she was getting. But it never came across as anything other than that. It wasn't personal. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't, she wasn't trying to undermine her in any way, which I thought was great.
Do you remember the scene that we had, Kate and I, in the freezer?
Yes. I love that
so
scene.
That was one where we could establish relationship. We didn't get a lot of opportunities in the script to do that, but there's so much action too going on. But that one was, really you got to see into where they were coming from and intertwined their own needs, kind of that was interesting and fun. And that was another one of those that was actually rewritten as you're walking onto the set.
Okay, so let's. And so what was happening that was creating that? Was that just the writers were doing that, or was Network it? Do you know why you were?
No, Network was never really around to make those kind of notes. That was just Kate was very specific about what she wanted. It was partially her show. Her production company owned part of that show, a good part of it, and she really knew what she wanted. And if it wasn't what she wanted, she would make those adjustments. So like I said, we all kept on our toes, and it was for the better. She would make the scene better.
And I love, again, that is the charm of the show. The show survives, I think, and maintains its charm because of the relationships in the show. Those little moments, the moments between Francine and Amanda, the moments obviously between Amanda and Scarecrow and Lee Stetson, and even the Mel Stewart, like it's just a very charming show.
Mm-hmm. That's a good word for it. Yeah.
It has a lot of charm, and it's the kind of show that doesn't really get made as much anymore, which is sort of an action comedy show. We can see that in movies, but we take our spying really seriously now.
Yeah, no, I think it's too innocent also
yes,
to be made today. It doesn't have the edges, even with Francine or without. It doesn't have today's elements, I don't think. But yet people, like I say, these fans are still watching it like on their old DVDs and things.
So I do want to ask you about season 3. Kate Jackson directed a couple episodes, the only female director on the show.
Mm-hmm.
How was that? How were those shows? And did that change anything for Francine and for you as an actress?
I don't think it did. No. I mean, she obviously knew the show better than anybody back in her hand. So those went well. And then, of course, the episode titles, I never remember those either. I have my own names for all of them,
The other thing is that I think there was a couple episodes where Kate Jackson had to leave. So there's a tennis episode that I think seems to have been written for,
yes.
Lee and Amanda.
Yeah, well, you picked that up.
Yeah.
Good. You're not supposed to have been able to see that.
Well, Playing for Keeps is the tennis episode.
Yeah. Tennis.
Yeah. Was that a last minute? Did you remember that episode? And do you remember being like, okay, Francine's being called up to the show?
Yeah. Yes, I do remember. I remember actually on the set being handed the script, and all they kind of did was cross out, Amanda and put Francine. I remember talking, I think it was to the AD who had his walkie-talkie on at the time with production office. And I remember saying, Amanda and Francine are like really different kinds of characters, and you can't just really give me this dialogue. And the producer didn't know that I was listening on the other end and said, she got a problem with that? I'm a leaper. I'm always like really, diplomatic about things. And I'm just saying, it's not that I have a problem. It's just that they're really different characters. And it's a little sticky, but
Yeah.
we did what we could.
But when you go into season 3 and season 4 of a show, and you're not being used as much as you would hope as an actress, or you would hope for your character, like, what do you do? How do you make that work for you?
Well, that's why I was begging literally to do other shows, because I was being offered roles, and begging is what I was doing. So that's what you do. I went to production office. I had one very teary-eyed meeting with our producers at the time. That's when I had my little notebook full of, this is what Francine is. Can we kind of try to bring her, like save the whales? I was trying to save Francine, I wanted to bring her back a little bit, and it didn't. They seemed to be understanding that things proceeded as they were, more status quo. And I was getting the feeling also that, I don't know, I never took it for granted. I was always extremely grateful. I'm telling you, literally every time I drove onto the lot, it was just like, this is a wonderful, wonderful gift. But I was starting to feel like, don't say anything, don't make any waves. You're lucky to have a job at all.
And then in season 4, Kate Jackson gets diagnosed with breast cancer. And we know that now.
And I didn't know that for the longest time. I didn't know that. Bruce knew. And I think it was Bruce that told me, but it was quite late. So I really didn't know what was going on. I just kept hearing she wasn't well. It's kind of generic, couldn't come in. But I didn't know until really, really late. Again, I'm always the last one to know anything. I don't know what it is.
I mean, and so it does seem like there were a couple episodes again where Francine sort of gets kind of shoved in.
Yeah, well, the script, the last where I finally had a boyfriend and I had an apartment and all that stuff, that was written by Juanita. Back in early season, when did Juanita come on? She
came on the second half of season 1 and all of season 2.
And she wrote that script, and it for whatever reason didn't get made, but it was on the shelf for the longest time. So years later, when we needed material with Francine, there was that script. It was already written. So they had to build my set for my apartment. They had to bring on the boyfriend that I didn't know I had. I was rather excited because I waited a long time to have a boyfriend, and Beeman was as close as I got, and I just wasn't interested in him. So.
Oh my God, there's a lot of fan love about Francine and Beeman. I got to tell you.
I love Beeman as a person. He's a great guy, but Francine wasn't into it.
It is surprising. There's a script written in season 1 or 2 that basically would have established a whole other life for Francine.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was there.
That's and it gets done in season 4.
Wow.
Yeah,
it gets pulled out, dusted off, and bam, there we go.
And you weren't aware that the script even existed until they dusted it off.
Didn't have a clue.
Oh my goodness.
Didn't have a clue.
Wow.
And there was one line that I believe is in late season 3 or early season 4 episode. I couldn't find it. I went looking for it again, but I didn't have time to watch all the shows again to find this one line. That's kind of a throwaway line. Lee Stetson is on the phone with Billy and they're, do this and do that and whatever. Have Francine do her hooker routine.
Oh, I remember the hotel.
Is literally the line.
Francine has a lot of routines.
I got to tell you, I kind of almost fell out of my chair at the time, or the couch, because I was like, that would never have been a line in episode 1. I mean, in season 1.
Well, what it would have actually been do her honeypot, and that is Intel talk for the same thing. That So whoever wrote that, I don't know, but that was what season you said, 3.
It's late 3, or I thought it was in 3, but I couldn't find it.
We've already lost Juanita by then, probably. And,
yeah, it was just sort of startling, and now my husband and I say it a lot. Oh, just have Francine do her hooker routine.
My husband says that too. That's funny.
And so here's my question. When you were on the show, did you feel like, oh, this is a show that puts women up front? Did you feel like it was what we would call a feminist show now, or at least a female-driven show?
I think it was right in the target of the time in terms of that, because I was that age where when I grew up in this very traditional family with a mother who stayed home and a father who worked, all I wanted was to be a professional, because I was in that era, right, where that was sort of being first introduced, and it sounded very exciting to me. So all I wanted to do was, and so Francine also, and then Amanda even also, maybe later and maybe in her own way. But I think that now this is, 80s, and I was growing up more. I was born in the 50s, so, see that difference in time. But I didn't start thinking about those things until being of age to work. So I don't know about, I don't think it was ahead of the game or behind the game, actually. I think it was kind of right there where it should be at that time. And Francine, like I said, Francine could have easily been a male character. And she wasn't. She was that combination of it. She was very yang, she was that combination of energies that was definitely, it was career, it was power, it was the whole 9 yards.
And again, as a counterpoint, Remington Steele, Laura Holt is way more Francine than she is Amanda King, right?
Okay.
We're about to look, we're going to look at Remington Steele next, and Laura Holt is all about business and all about this, and then a man walks in, so it gets a little more complicated. We have a special segment on our show called 90s TV Babies, and it's a younger generation that looks at these shows from a different perspective and talks about them. And I have to say, you're a favorite of theirs in the episodes of Scarecrow Mrs. King, because they're like, the outfits, the hair, the attitude.
I know.
And they really it does really sort of pop for them.
That's good to know. Good to know. I know I did a lot of, also in the 80s, I did a lot of Dick Clark's Pyramid. It's a game show,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they have celebrity contestants. Well, Dick Clark and I really got along well, so he would have me on all the time. And on that show, I could dress as myself. So I wore I was Cyndi Lauper, Madonna. I had the lace gloves, the ribbon in the hair, the big shoulders, the big hair, the spiky Rod Stewart hair. There's back to Rod Stewart. And, and the people that go back and watch those now, like on YouTube and whatnot, and you're right, it's all the younger people that say, oh, she was classic 80s. I love it. It's so fun to be historically admired. I just really keep going back to the Life of the Party of the Maids with Kate. That was just when Kate's on a roll and you get to work with her like that with a good script and everything's working right. It's just magic, It's like a band when all the instruments are just kind of in sync with each other, and that really stands out for me a lot as my favorite episode in every way. I mean, just as a viewer and as a participant,
And then so season 4 comes and you don't get picked up. You don't get renewed.
Actually,
Oh, do tell.
I don't know. Maybe,
come on.
Some say that we did, and but it wasn't to be. It wasn't to be.
Is that in the book? Is that what we're getting? You're saving it for the book?
No, I don't think it. I'm not sure. I haven't gotten that part yet.
So when you stopped shooting season 4, had it been determined at that point whether or not the show was going to continue?
No, we were told we were told that was it, because I remember the last day of shooting, and I was shooting that episode, by the way, that Francine episode with her apartment and her boyfriend. That was, I think, the last one we shot, and I could not say goodbye to everybody. It was too difficult. It was too emotional. I was crying. I would cry thinking about it.
Oh my.
And I drove off, and had my farewells afterwards. But it was really, really sad, because that's 4 years of really intense being with people that many hours a day. When they say it's like a family, it is like a family. Kate had health issues that were priority. And I don't want to say anything that's not, I don't know what's public and what's not. So I'm just saying that was the most important thing. She had to take care of that. And so there was not to be any more. And she had to have surgeries and all sorts of things. It was not easy. And that was Scarecrow Mrs. King. That was the show. So there was no show.
There was no show without Kate Jackson. Right. And such a scary time. Like, it's scary all the time. But I think, 30, 40 years ago, getting a diagnosis of breast cancer was terrifying.
Yeah. And if everything had been in order, and if Kate had been healthy and all, we would have gone for another season, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. I mean, that, and it's also sort of seems like scary to even announce that in the 80s. I think women were not comfortable saying, hey, I need this time.
Well, it's always very personal. Health matters. You don't want to have everybody in your face. And she's a huge star. She was, at the time, her TVQ, which is rating on the scale, was way, way up there. She was one of the few women at the top of TVQ. If you combine both genders, she was like right up there on the top, because Charlie's Angels and everything else. And
so you're still in touch with Kate Jackson?
I am. we had a lot of years where we didn't see each other. We just, like happens on shows, you lose touch with people. And then we reconnected a few years ago, and we went out to the movies together and had a lot of fun, and then lost touch again. And so I'm trying to reconnect again. She actually wanted to do a podcast about our show with kind of a fast forward, going where our characters would be today, that kind of a thing. She was talking to me about that. And she had some really good ideas.
That could be fun. Yeah.
I think people would be ready for that. So you should tell her. Well, we'll promote it. We'll have her on.
Sounds good.
But also, I think it was just a kind of a perfect blend of Kate Jackson and a character that was going to see goodness in people. Like there's really, again, that's where I think the charm and the stuff that sort of holds up.
It's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
It's one of the things when I'm looking back at shows and again, it felt like in some ways a more innocent time, or I was just, a young baby person, but it also felt like there was a lot of possibility in those characters. And so I'm glad that Francine and Amanda are friends. I'm glad to hear that.
Yes. And I see Bruce every now and then also at the, there's these charity events that Hollywood throws that Bruce goes to. And because every year when they have this event, you have to wear, it's always Western wear. And I, like Francine and me, have zero Western wear. I have like one cowboy hat that just for these events. And then I throw on some high-heeled boots or something. I think this is kind of Western, right? And then Bruce shows up in his full garb, his John Wayne look.
With his saddle over his shoulder.
Yeah, right. He brings the horse to the parking lot. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All right. And so we're going to get to 3 questions, which is our sort of last wrap up. But what's happening?
Oh no!
Don't worry. They're easy. They're super easy. You're chatty. You're fine. No, we love chatty. This is a podcast about chatty. Yes. Chatty is great and wonderful. It's a compliment.
Okay, I'll take it that way.
Oh, sure. When Bruce Boxleitner says it, he's on you.
Blabby Bruce. We call him Blabby Bruce.
Blabby Bruce. We're happy for chatty.
Good.
Podcasts love chatty. And, I love women who have something to say. But I did want to say, what's happening? Stuff happening?
I am doing real estate, and I'm kind of doing the Francine version of it. I mean, I've got a small high-end clientele, but I've sold homes to princes and rock stars and celebrities of all types. So, it's that certain, I have a listing for $14 million. That's really, really beautiful and hoping to sell soon. I dream of retiring, honestly. There's a lot of nonprofit work I'm interested in, and I would really like to branch out and do things a little bit more in the meaningful sector, that point in my life where I want to make my big footprint of meaning on the world. So,
all right. Well, keep us posted. Let us know when you're doing your next creative project, because we want to hear that. And
sure.
And when you're selling something like a $400,000 house.
I think that's a garage here.
I was going to say, is there such a thing in this area in Los Angeles anywhere?
Nice try. Nice try. I was just, but $14 million, I think that's going to sell really well.
That's for a young professional. That's not the high end yet. That's not the 20 million and up. They just sold one for like 185 million, in Bel Air.
Wow.
Ridiculous house. Ridiculous.
185 million.
Yeah. It was they kind of shaved a mountaintop and built this house that goes on forever with, like theaters and bowling alleys and all this we need in our home. 32 bathrooms.
It's more of like a city. More like
it's real estate porn is what it is.
Isn't that the house that the guy built? And it had to go to auction or something?
Yes, that's the one. It's called The One.
Yes. Oh, my gosh.
Now it's called The Half because it sold for half what they were. It's just my joke.
Okay. All right. So here we are at 3 questions. What's the 80s ladies-driven TV show that resonated with you? And you can't say Scarecrow Mrs. King because you were on it.
But I didn't watch it. 80s ladies. I liked Cagney and Lacey. Does that count?
Mm-hmm.
Totally counts.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
I got one down.
Check. What are your favorite ladies of TV shows that you're watching, or just TV shows? But you don't watch TV.
I know this too. Well, let's see. Now I'm going to come up with something because I do occasionally watch things like on Netflix or and I just had to watch all that stuff for the awards, which I loved Dope Sick, but that wasn't ladies so much.
It doesn't have to be network.
Oh yeah, no, it doesn't have to be network.
Right. What's the
It can
one?
be streaming. It can
What's
be
the one on the Netflix of the making of Anna?
Inventing Anna?
Oh, Anna Delvey. I just watched that. Yeah, she was great. And I was so curious about her accent, but that in fact was a correct accent I found later.
Oh, really? Because there has been a lot written about what the heck was that accent, and
Well,
nobody
I was
seemed
listening
to.
to a German, Tess
Mhm.
Lowry is her name. She's a German, I think she's a microbiologist. And she had the exact same accent. It was almost like she borrowed it from her. And so I thought, well, this must be a certain part of Germany. Maybe she researched it because it's a rare accent I hadn't heard before. And I'm like, got an ear for accents.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
All right. Final question.
Oh, no.
Listen, you've already told us like 3 of these. What's the most like television moment or action hero moment or sort of just like one of those moments you're like, this must have been scripted that you've experienced in real life? But you told us like 5 of them. So you could revisit one of them.
Oh, wow. Yeah. My whole life has been that way, honestly. I would say maybe Animal House. You know, the way that all came down, probably going for that other role, asking to do Babs, getting Babs, and then all of a sudden the movie blowing up like huge. All of that kind of put together was really sort of like a Hollywood movie, you know, kind of a happening that you don't see in life that much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah.
And I'm super impressed about your ability to advocate at a young age for yourself and for what you wanted. It's pretty amazing when I think about
Thank
it.
you.
Like that you know, or it's like, hey, here, take this role. And you're like, could I have the other one?
Yeah.
Like-
And it was interesting because in those days, when you did Playboy, you had to hide it in Hollywood if you're going to be an actress. And I became an accidental actress because of that thing they told you about. That's another one of those moments, right? But so when I was offered roles like that, nobody knew I was Playmate when I was going on auditions. Nobody in Hollywood. My agent was probably the only one who knew, and I didn't talk about it. And I didn't want anything to kind of reminisce back and show up in Playboy, although they did always say, "Our Martha on Happy Days." You know, they always put some little blurb in the magazine when I would do something. But yeah, I had to be really, really careful. And then flash forward many years later, I'm still not talking about it. And I go on an audition for, I don't remember what it was, a movie. And the character was supposed to have been a Playmate. And I didn't get the role. And the feedback was, we don't buy that she could be a Playmate. And that was the best feedback I ever got on an audition that I didn't get. I thought that was funny. Audience isn't going to buy it.
No. That's so like, and so such an interesting thing. So do you feel differently about having been a Playmate now than you did then or whenever? Like,
I didn't feel much of anything then. To me, honestly, I had been a model. And to me, it was another modeling job with a lot more money and no clothes. It just really didn't seem, I was a hippie, and being without your clothes wasn't a big deal. It wasn't sort of like, and I wasn't, doing anything pornographic. I was lying with, a little piece of sheer fabric in between my legs and flowers behind me. Everything was soft focus and it was all that girl next door kind of look in the day, very fuzzy, soft and pretty. And I've always been a fan of artwork. And to me, it was like beautiful artwork. I had some of the best photographers in the world shoot me. I really loved the images they came up with. There was nothing I felt compromised about. I was paid really well. But it was during women's liberation. So I was going on the road and I was meeting and greeting and people were coming up and throwing bras at me and stuff. I didn't wear a bra either. So it was kind of weird, a juxtaposition of themes. Every audition I went to, I went business first. That's why they said that nobody believed she could be a Playmate,
This went a different way.
Yeah.
But
Sorry,
it's good. No,
It's fine.
You know what? That we're looking at, TV ladies from the 80s, and this was a big part of it, and how women had to navigate a world that was not always welcoming to them, was not always, easy to navigate. Thank you so much for being on the show and for talking about Scarecrow Mrs. King and your amazing career and just your experience. And I'm super excited about just how enthusiastic you are about life. Like that.
Oh,
That's what I'm getting from this. It's like, oh, I'm going to go on the road with Rod Stewart. I'm going to go create a show over here. I need to do a cabaret show and sing with a guy. I need to find a guy who's going to sing with me. Oh, okay, I'm going to marry him. I think that's great.
And how all along through your career you were looking for different creative outlets. If it wasn't happening here, you said, fine, I'll just go make one over here and I'll go try this. And that's really amazing. That's really amazing.
Well, thank you guys. But we did have a lot of writer strikes and actor strikes, and there always had something to do to fill the gaps in during those. So, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Anyway, it's been great. I'm a big fan of the show and a big fan of yours. And I'm really glad that you were able to come on and talk with us
Thank
today.
you.
Same. It's been a real treat. Thank you for sharing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sharon. Sharona. My
Sharona.
My
Sharona. Okay, we're going to go out with a song.
Thank you, Miss Martha. It's been wonderful.
I really appreciate it.
Be well. Take care.
Bye.
Our audiography for today is the Martha Smith official Facebook page at, Facebook. And the Scarecrow and Mrs. King anniversary website, also on Facebook, facebook.com/Scarecrow and Mrs. King anniversary. That's a page devoted to the reunions featuring Martha Smith, Bruce Boxleitner, and other people involved in Scarecrow and Mrs. King. I want to thank Fiona W. for enjoying our Scarecrow episodes and recommending a very cool book for our audiography, which I'm just going to add here today. She recommended When Women Invented Television by Jennifer Keeshan Armstrong.
Tamara M. was inspired by our Scarecrow discussion about female characters not needing a romantic relationship with male counterparts to recommend that we discuss Hunter with Stephanie Kramer and Fred Dreyer.
Hunter has come up before. It's not a show I know very well, Sharon, but I think we definitely will have to cover it at some point.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so we haven't actually completed exploring season 4 of Scarecrow Mrs. King, and a lot happens in that season. No spoilers for now, but we're going to pause for a minute or several episodes on Scarecrow Mrs. King. We reserve the right to return, recall witnesses, and bring new interviewers on at any time. Who knows? We know we'll be talking to some wonderful SMK fans that we're going to bring on the show, and we are still reaching out to Bruce and Kate. Keep your fingers crossed. You never know what can happen. Anything at all at 80s TV Ladies. That's the fun part.
When we started this podcast, we never intended to do episode-by-episode walkthroughs of Scarecrow and Mrs. King, even though we love those kinds of podcasts. West Wing Weekly,
Office Ladies,
Parks and Recollection.
I love them all.
Just to name a few. But that's not what we're doing, because we want to cover more shows than we would be able to by going episode to episode.
So we're curious what you think. This is season 1, and we are enjoying ourselves immensely. But do you love going season by season? Do you love the interviews? Do you like a combination? Continue to reach out. We want to know your suggestions. Tell us an 80s TV Lady show that resonated with you, and tell us what you'd like to see us cover on this show.
So on our next episode, we will be talking about another romantic comedy action show, Remington Steele, starring Stephanie Zimbalist and Pierce Brosnan. This happens to be one of my favorites.
This is a Sharon pick. We have some very exciting guests who will be joining us over the next few episodes to talk about this show. Send in your questions. What do you want to know about Remington Steele? What do you want to know about Laura Holt's deep, dark secrets?
And let's say we got, I don't know, Stephanie Zimbalist, star of Remington Steele, on the show. What questions would you have for her? Email us, 80stvladies@gmail.com, or go to the website, 80stvladies.com. We hope 80s TV Ladies brings you joy and laughter and lots of fabulous new and old shows to watch, all of which will lead us toward being amazing ladies of the 21st century.